Today is our last week of the Year W Women's Lectionary. Next Thursday, we should be starting this one, Year A, but since next Thursday is Thanksgiving Day in the United States, we will not be meeting. I don't know about you all, but I'm going to be doing something else other than sitting here leading a contemplation group next Thursday morning. So our practice has been to contemplate the gospel text for the upcoming Sunday. But since we aren't meeting next Thursday, which would be the text for the first Sunday of Advent, I'm going to switch it up, and what we will do is in 2 weeks, we will contemplate the gospel text from the previous Sunday. So we will do that at least through Advent. And then we might switch it up and go back to contemplating the text before the Sunday. But I'm not sure that really makes a difference to anyone, because our churches aren't using this lectionary schedule anyways. I think it would make more of a difference if we had chosen a lectionary that we are going to be using in our congregations as well. But I did just want to let you know that we will be switching up our books. This is our last week for this one, and the next time we meet in 2 weeks, we will begin with Year A. So anyways, this coming Sunday is the last Sunday of Ordinary Time, the last Sunday before the beginning of Advent. This Sunday is called the Reign of Christ, or Majesty of Christ, or Christ the King Sunday in various Christian traditions. Some of us may struggle with the language of monarchy or kingdom. Dr. Gaffney points out that this language is imperfect, but familiar. So I thought I would read to you her commentary for this week. She says, the liturgical year ends with a reflection on the majesty of Christ as the church prepares to begin a new year, remembering his first advent while preparing for his next. As the weeks reviewing the rise and falls of Israel's monarchs during ordinary time have made abundantly clear, monarchy is, as all human institutions, an enterprise that is doomed to fail. Yet monarchy and its conventions have given us language for God, imperfect yet familiar, as the psalm amply demonstrates. Jesus takes that language and those conventions and inverts them. The reign of God and its majesty are very different from the splendor of the world's sovereigns. To the fallen Judean monarchy and their Babylonian colonizers and occupiers, Jesus says the poor of the land, who were deemed not worth the labor to even deport, are at the heart of the reign of God. The majesty of Christ is not found in treasures of temple or palace, burgled and broken apart, but in a crown of thorns, beaten in by bullies, and in his battered and denuded body. This human, mortal, woman-born Jesus is the glory and majesty of God. In the words of the Epistle to the Hebrews, the brilliance of God's glory and reproduction of God's very being. So the text we will be contemplating today is another portion of Matthew's retelling of Jesus' crucifixion. In this scene, we will ponder the physical and political reality of Jesus, the King of the Jews and the King of the universe. But before we move to the text, I want to read you one more rather lengthy quote from Richard Rohr's book, Dancing, Standing Still, Healing the World from a Place of Prayer. I found this post on a blog by United Methodist pastor Lisa Ann Moss DeGrinia, addressing Matthew 27. And I just found these words to be incredibly powerful, and I wanted to share them with you all. He says, "The significance of Jesus's wounded body is his deliberate and conscious holding of the pain of the world and refusing to send it elsewhere. The wounds were not necessary to convince God that we were lovable. The wounds are to convince us of the path and the price of transformation. They are what will happen to you if you face and hold sin in compassion instead of projecting it in hatred. Jesus' wounded body is an icon for what we are all doing to one another and to the world. Jesus' resurrected body is an icon of God's response to our crucifixions. The two images contain the whole message of the gospel. A naked, bleeding, wounded, crucified man is the most unlikely image for God, a most illogical image for omnipotence, which is most people's natural image of God. Apparently, we have got God all wrong. Jesus is revealing a very central problem for religion by coming into the world in the most unexpected and even unwanted way. The cross of Jesus was a mirror held up to history so we could utterly change our normal image of God. Wow, right? So this Sunday is Christ the King Sunday. So what kind of king is Jesus? So let's dive into the text and see what the Spirit shows us. Before I read the passage, I will turn on my candle as a symbol of God's presence with us here today. And I pray for our graces to know Jesus more intimately, to love him more intensely, and to follow him more closely. Matthew 27, 11 to 14, and 27 to 37. Now Jesus stood before the governor, and the governor questioned him, saying, Are you the king of the Jews? Jesus said, You say so. And when he was accused by the chief priests and elders, he did not answer. Then Pilate said to him, "Do you not hear how many accusations they make against you?" And he did not answer him, not one word, so that the governor was greatly astonished. Then the soldiers of the governor took Jesus into the governor's command post, and they gathered the whole cohort around him. They stripped him and put a scarlet robe on him, and having woven a crown from thorns, they put it on his head, along with a reed in his right hand. And they knelt before him and mocked him, saying, "Hail, King of the Jews!" And they spat on him and took the reed and struck him on the head. After mocking him, they stripped him of the robe and put his clothes on him. Then they led him away to be crucified. Now, going out, they found a Syrian man named Simon. This man they conscripted to carry his cross. And coming to a place called Golgotha, which means skull place, they offered him wine mixed with vinegar to drink. But when he tasted it, he would not drink. And when they had him crucified, they divided his clothes among themselves by casting lots. Then they sat down and keeping watch over him there. Now they placed over his head his charge, written as, "This is Jesus, the King of the Jews." The word of the Lord. So when I spent time with the text this week, I felt it was important for me to not influence your imaginations of this scene as it is happening. So I've decided to not ask you guiding questions as I read through the passage a second time. Instead, I will read the text slowly with longish pauses for you to ponder what is happening in the scene. Things that Matthew recorded and things that may have happened that did not get written down. Notice what you experience with your senses, what you see and hear and smell and feel, perhaps even taste. Allow yourself to participate in the scene as much as feels natural to you, becoming one of the characters mentioned in the text or someone who is not specifically identified. Or perhaps you feel more comfortable watching the scene from a distance. That is fine too. Pay attention to what feelings emerge as you experience the story. Perhaps you will have a strong impulse to intervene, to stop these events from happening. If so, you may want to recall the conversation between Jesus and Peter earlier in Matthew, chapter 16, 21 to 23. From that time on, Jesus began to show his disciples that he must go to Jerusalem and undergo great suffering at the hands of the elders and chief priests and scribes, and be killed on the third day and be raised." And Peter took Jesus aside and began to rebuke him, saying, "God forbid it, Lord. This must never happen to you." But Jesus turned and said to Peter, "Get behind me, Satan. You are a hindrance to me. For you are setting your mind not on divine things, but on human things." With this in mind, consider how you might express compassion to Jesus in this scene. Calm, which means with, and passion, which means suffer. How might you be present to Jesus, King of the Jews, in this his great time of suffering? So before I read the passage a second time, I invite you to take a couple of centering breaths, breathing in God's Spirit and breathing out anything that distracts you from being in the presence of God. And I will pray again for our graces to know Jesus more intimately, to love him more intensely, and to follow him more closely. I invite you to enter the story. Now, Jesus stood before the governor, and the governor questioned him, saying, "Are you the king of the Jews?" Jesus said, "You say so." And when Jesus was accused by the chief priests and elders, he did not answer. Then Pilate said to him, "Do you not hear how many accusations they make against you?" But Jesus did not answer him, not one word, so that the governor was greatly astonished. Then the soldiers of the governor took Jesus into the governor's command post, and they gathered the whole cohort around him. They stripped him and put a scarlet robe on him. And having woven a crown from thorns, they put it on his head, along with a reed in his right hand. And they knelt before him and mocked him, saying, "Hail, King of the Jews!" And they spat on him. And they took the reed and struck him on his head. After mocking him, they stripped him of the robe and put his clothes back on him. Then they led him away to be crucified. Now, going out, they found a Syrian man named Simon. This man they conscripted to carry Jesus's cross. And coming to a place called Golgotha, which means skull place, they offered Jesus wine mixed with vinegar to drink. But when he tasted it, he would not drink. And when they had crucified him, they divided his clothes among themselves by casting lots. Then they sat down and kept watch over him there. Now they placed over his head his charge, written as, "This is Jesus, the King of the Jews." So I invite you to spend the next 10 minutes in a colloquy with the divine. Speak with God about what you experienced during the contemplation, especially the parts of the story that caused you to experience strong emotions. What might God want to say to you about your life or the life of your community as it relates to this story? When I sound my chimes, that will indicate that you have about a minute to wrap up your colloquy, after which time I will end the silence with this week's psalm. If you're doing the contemplation later with the recording, go ahead and hit pause now and spend as much time in contemplation as you feel you need, and then restart the video when you're ready to hear the psalm. We'll close our silence with Psalm 47. All you peoples, clap your hands. Shout to God with a joyful sound. For the sovereign God, the Most High, is awesome, a great governor over all the earth. God subdued peoples under us and nations under our feet. God chose our heritage for us, the pride of Rebekah's womb she loves. God has gone up with a shout, Sinai's fire with the sound of a trumpet. Sing praises to God, sing praises. Sing praises to our sovereign, sing praises. For God is sovereign over all the earth. Sing praises with a psalm. God is ruler over the nations. God is seated on God's holy throne. The nobles of the peoples gather. The people of the God of Hagar and Sarah. For to God belong the shields of the earth. God is highly exalted. Amen.